Welcome to Carefree and Conscious, paranormal and profound authors with stunning true stories. If you like this type of content, be sure to subscribe. I'm your host, Susanne Wilson, the Carefree Medium and Intuition Educator. Today on Carefree and Conscious, you are not broken. How to succeed using natural laws with Joshua Tongol. Joshua seemed to have been born with the deck stacked against him. He has had many lifelong physical challenges that he has since overcome. He's the author of 2 books, So You Thought You Knew, and The Secret to Awesomeness. Joshua Tongol is a spiritual teacher, out-of-body explorer, energy healer, and a psychic medium who's trained at Arthur Findlay College. He has a unique and diverse background and has been known as one of the freshest voices for modern day spirituality to take us through the 2020s and beyond. He holds a BA in Biblical Studies from Biola University and an MA in Theology from Talbot School of Theology. He and his wife Remy currently live in the Philippines. In the past, you'd be hard-pressed to find a greater skeptic of spiritual healing than was Joshua Tongol, but that's all changed now. Stay tuned and find out why in You Are Not Broken, How to Succeed Using Natural Laws. Joshua Tongol, welcome to Carefree and Conscious.
Awesome. Thanks, Suzanne. So good to be here.
I'm really happy that you're here. You have had an amazing path in life, and there'll be things that people can really relate to. You have a lot to teach, but you also had what I would call a really rough start in life. And I want to, you were born with one hand, isn't that right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yep.
And some, yeah. And then some other things have happened to you in your life that were very physically challenging. And you became a healer. You've become a theologian. You're now more spiritual than religious. I'm going to just give you some open time here to tell us about your path. Take us through how you walked through all the challenges and where that led you.
Cool. So here we go. So I'll start from the beginning. So I was actually raised, Suzanne, and everybody else listening, I was raised in a Christian home. And I think some people tend to forget that there's just more than one version of Christianity. So I was part of the Christian stream of people who are called charismatics. So charismatics were the types of Christians who believe that what we call the supernatural gifts of the Holy Spirit are still available today. For instance, we have things like the gift of tongues, the gift of healing, the gift of prophecy, things considered quote unquote spiritual. And I say quote unquote because I do think it's like a misnomer to call things, supernatural. The supernatural gifts of the Spirit. And I say it's a misnomer because I actually think that these abilities are normal, but that's for another discussion. But I was raised in that kind of environment, but actually I was raised in a more what people would consider the extreme version of it, because I was part of the charismatic group that was on, many of you or some of you have probably seen it on television. We call it like the Word of Faith movement. And these are the prosperity teachers, the people who are teaching to name it and claim it, to speak things into existence. The prosperity gospel, healing, prophecy. They're always talking to the camera saying, be healed in Jesus' name, and blah, 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 blah. But mine was more extreme in the sense that we were part of a revival movement where people were actually having holy laughter, like uncontrollable laughter in gatherings. So it looks like when you walk into a service, it looks like everybody's just like butt drunk. Like that's not an exaggeration at all. People are literally laughing to the top of their lungs, on top of each other, like piling on top of each other. And some of them even had like a Holy Ghost glue, which is like a funny term. That's when people would be stuck on the floor. For some reason, the Holy Ghost would do something like that, according to us Christians. People would be falling down all the time. We call that being slain in the spirit. And so I was in that scene 100% ever since I was a child. So I was like in the main church in Los Angeles, like the main hub for the Asian charismatic scene in LA, where we had all the big names at that time. And so I would go, to what we would call like a miracle crusades. Actually, let me not get into that yet. I was always fascinated with near-death experiences, Suzanne. And my mom would always tell me these things ever since I was like a little child. And my mom would tell me stories of people who would die, they go to heaven, they see Jesus, they're like in this crazy environment that's like alive. And as a child, I've always thought, oh, I would love to experience that, just not the near-death part, you know. And but I was always interested in that world, you know, of things that were like out of the ordinary. And I also had experiences, if we would call them paranormal, ever since I was a little child. So if I could just bring up two of them that were, you know, these are very vivid to me. I had many, but these are the ones that really stood out. So one of the earliest ones that I can remember was when I was like maybe around 5 years old. And I was just in the room. It was like late at night and I was fully awake. And I literally saw this ghost, just a ghostly figure floating in the corner of my bedroom. And it didn't say anything. Um, it didn't hurt me at all. But since I was like a little kid, I just screamed. And my parents came in the room and they prayed over me. And, you know, because back then, especially as a little child, as a Christian, you know, all we think of are just angels and demons. And this didn't look like an angel. So I just assumed that it was probably something else. Another incident happened when I was older and we were about to go out of the house one day. And then my dad tells me, he's like, "Hey, Joe," because my nickname is Joe. He's like, "Joe, why don't you close the sliding door?" So our house has a really big sliding door that separates the living room from the patio. So I shut it 100%. I shut the door. As I was walking away, I literally saw and heard, I saw a flash of light behind me and I heard this sound go, "Chew." Like it actually sounded like that. And I saw a flash, like as if it was a camera, like someone taking a picture of me with a flash on. And then I was like, "Well, what the heck was that?" And right when that happened, I heard my dad say, "Hey, I told you to close the door." And I turned around and it was completely open. So I remember those two things growing up. And it was just very strange. Of course, there's nothing too significant about it in the sense of like my Christian faith and how to understand those things. But this also leads me to what you brought up earlier of me being born with one hand, right? So if you look at it, it's not necessarily one hand, it's just more of an underdeveloped hand, but I still got a palm, you know, I can still do stuff. But it was something that I struggled with for most of my life, to be honest, not just from as a child, but even as an adult. And unfortunately, you know, of course, this has happened to a lot of people. I got teased a lot by a lot of kids on the playground. It was always like a cheap shot for them. Like if they wanted to argue with me, at least I don't have one hand, you know, like it was just an easy shot for them. And I go home crying. And it was just very, very hard. So unfortunately, it got to me, Suzanne. Like it made me very insecure. I just would never show it, or, you know, like all the time, I would just always have it under a table when we're out in public or things like that. And what made it, I guess you could say, made it a little more challenging was because I did grow up in that charismatic world of the supernatural church where we believed in the miraculous, right? We had a saying, God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, which means that if you look at the stories throughout the Bible, God did a lot of healing stories in the Old Testament, parting the sea, up into the New Testament with healing the deaf, the blind, the mute, like the whole thing, right? Crippled. So if God can do that before, God can do that stuff today. So because I lived in that world where we constantly had faith healers coming to our church in LA, famous ones from Korea, from Africa, you know, the big names where people would just flock to them, I would try to get healed. And not only did I try to get healed at those events, and I didn't get healed, obviously, I would go to these miracle crusades that were like all over, you know, the state at that time in California. That's where I was living at the time. And I would go to all those big events and cry out to God, you know, for healing. But the turning point for me was when I was 17 years old. And when I was 17, I was invited to an event where the biggest healer at that time, this is back in the 90s, he was in Anaheim, California. And so I was like, dude, okay, if this guy's here, I got to go, right? Because this guy's anointed. That's the language that we use. Anointed is just like he's special, pretty much, right? God's hand is upon this guy. So I was like, so this is how much faith I had, you guys. I told everyone well, not everyone, but, you know, a bunch of people at school and told my, you know, friends and family, I'm going to go to this crusade and I'm going to come back with two hands. And I was like, dang, you know, a lot of people like tripping out. And I was telling my non-Christian friends because I wanted to, for them to bear witness to the power of my Jesus, the power of my God, right? Because it's a way of also leading people to Christ by seeing the supernatural power of Jesus. So I did that. I took my friends there, who are non-believers, and they're just watching this whole show go on. The faith healer is very showy, just waving his hand, and everyone's falling down, and he's blowing on the audience. They're falling down. People are speaking in tongues, and very emotionally charged. Stuff that I'm used to, right? But my friends were just like watching the whole thing. I'm sure there was a lot of questions going on in their mind. And I was just there lifting up my hands and crying, screaming. I didn't mind screaming because everyone else was screaming anyways, crying out to God, for their healing, people in wheelchairs. And I remember nothing was happening. And I was getting so sad and nervous. What's going on? What's going on, God? And so I was like, all right, I told my friends, why don't you guys take me down to the stage so the faith healer can lay hands on me, because maybe something will happen when he touches me, right? Because like Jesus touched people, stuff happened. So that was my way of thinking. So we went downstairs to the stage, but remember, this is like a huge event, right? In Anaheim, California. And it was so crowded. And then I guess there's just too many people. And it was the end of the night. And the speaker said, come back tomorrow, to like the whole audience. Before I went up on the stage, I was like, crap, dude. First of all, I didn't get healed. So that was a big disappointment. But also, I'll be honest, I was kind of embarrassed too, because I was, my friends are probably wondering, like, what the heck is this kind of event going on? And so I went back the next day, and obviously nothing happened. And honestly, Susanne, that changed my life. It was like a turning point for me in a direction of I was questioning things. So people that have heard my story, they would kind of read into things and they say, maybe Josh became bitter. I'll be honest with you. I wasn't bitter. I was very sad. So I was just thinking, maybe God doesn't do these things today. I do believe God did that in the Bible, the miracles, raising the dead, all those things, but maybe not today. So I wasn't mad at God. Honestly, I'm speaking sincerely from my heart, even though Christians have interpreted differently, thinking that I just became this bitter guy. I said, no, I was just very sad. And at the same time, when I was 17, Suzanne, after that event, I was introduced to something that I've never heard of before up to that point, called apologetics. I don't know if you're familiar with that word,
Yeah.
but if your audience is not familiar with that word, here's what apologetics is. Apologetics is basically a defense. So it's a defense of what? So for me, there's different kinds of apologists for different religions. I was learning something called Christian apologetics, which means that you're defending the Christian faith. So, for example, you meet an atheist, you meet a skeptic, says, "Oh, how do you know God exists?" A Christian apologist is someone that will give you all the arguments for the existence of God, like a philosophical argument, right? So I was doing stuff like that. I got heavily into that, like obsessively into it, and was studying the Bible for the first time because I was such a simple kid, you guys. I was so simple. I was just a child. I believed everything. A preacher says this, I would do it. Obviously, from just my story of going to all these events, I could say I was very gullible, and I trusted so many people. So in a sense, this apologetics was kind of like a double-edged sword for me because it helped me to start to think and not to just believe something right away. But I could honestly admit that as I got more and more into intellectual Christianity, as I got more and more into academia and in my head, I became overly cautious to the point where I didn't believe anything in the supernatural. And that's something that I wasn't willing to acknowledge until later throughout the years, because I would tell people like, yeah, I know God can do that. But if you tell me any story, I don't believe it for 8 long years, literally. And here's how bad it was. And if you were to meet people in my circle, especially in California, they can vouch for this. I was probably the most aggressive person you'll ever meet when it comes to criticizing the charismatic and the supernatural movement. I was the guy that would literally speak at churches to expose faith healers as they're just all charlatans. Because I started to look back, Suzanne, and think about how, wow, okay, I grew up in a movement that talks about miracles, but what miracles did I see? I saw people speaking in tongues, but that just sounds like you're saying banana backwards, blah, 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 blah. People falling down, that could just be a psychological thing, like hypnosis, expectation. You go up, you expect to fall, so you fall down. The power of the mind, things like that. Or people, I started to think, okay, but then there was these events where people claim to be healed of cancer, but then where's the proof? They just felt electricity all over their body and they were claiming that it was the Holy Spirit, So I started to have like a new lens of looking at my childhood and thinking, oh crap, dude, I think I grew up in a cultic environment because we were taught really not to question. And I remember I even got kicked out of retreats because I used to question at some point, that's a whole other issue. But so I went full on trying to expose for 8 years my childhood beliefs. And with a pure heart, I could honestly say from I did it because I thought that people were being duped. I thought people were being deceived for their money. Like, send in this money, God's going to heal you. And granted, there are charlatans. People do take advantage of people with their money. But I did throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I was always claiming to be what's called open but cautious. But like I said, it wasn't until years later that I was willing to acknowledge. I think I was more cautious than open, because any miracle you told me in 8 years, that 8 year period, I never believed it. It's like, show me the proof, give me the evidence. And that's actually a healthy thing, right? But I think even back then, no matter how much proof I had, I still wouldn't believe if I really think about it. So that's how skeptical I was. So I was never an atheist, just to clarify that. I was never an atheist. I was just an agnostic in the sense, like, I don't know. But I would even say I was even stronger than that, because I would say, yeah, some of these things, they're not really happening, and but then things changed for me back in 2005. And what happened was, so it was just pretty cool. Despite my hand, I could still break dance, Suzanne. So I have a palm, right? So I could still put my hand on the ground. And I've been doing that since elementary school. So that never stopped me. That was so interesting. I was so self-conscious about my hand, but when I'm breakdancing, I'm not self-conscious because I'm not thinking about other people. I'm just like dancing. So I was doing that. And in 2005, I went to a party. I went to a party and I was battling somebody. So that term battling, there's someone on the dance floor and there was a stranger there and I just started battling this guy. And then I did my little breakdance thing on the ground. I got up, nothing crazy. I didn't slam, I didn't fall, nothing, just my normal thing. I got up, and then everything below my waist got super heavy and got super numb. And I was like, what the hell is this? Like, honestly, I freaked out. The guy went in to respond to my battling, and then I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. I didn't go back in. I just stayed on the ground. I was stuck on the floor. Didn't know what was going on. And I just felt this excruciating pain, like in my back. And honestly, Suzanne, I don't think I've ever even had any back pain all these years as a breakdancer. And I wasn't even much of a stretcher. Like, I don't really stretch, which is probably not the best thing to do. I should stretch, but just throughout the years, I never made much of a big deal of stretching. I never had back pain. And all of a sudden, I had this excruciating pain in my back. I find out I was diagnosed with something called sciatica and a herniated disc. And so, without getting into too much detail with that, I could just describe the pain. It was so bad that I can't really walk unless I hold on to something. And keep in mind, this is my early 20s. I'm in my early 20s and I'm literally holding on to rails like I'm an old person, to be honest. And I remember seeing old people walk faster than me and I got really, really angry because I'm like, these old people are like walking normal. And here I am, I'm in my 20s. I'm holding onto rails and literally I would fall down because I would feel like a pain from my back shoot from my back to my butt to my feet. And every time I would wake up and get out of bed in the morning, this was during college. When I'm in my dorm room, when I step out to the floor on my bunk bed, I would literally feel like thousands of needles on my feet. So it was that bad. And if you were to just give me like my laptop, see, this is like a crazy memory for me. When I would carry my laptop, I would cry all the time, just going to class, walking back to class, because the pain was so excruciating. For those of you who have had excruciating pain or back pains, you know what I'm talking about. It's just it's like someone stabbing you in the back. And I remember even being stuck on the floor, like I would just be in the library reading a book and then I can't get up. So it was really that bad too. Just asking God, why is this happening to me? That's just the question I would ask as a Christian at the time. And then not too long after that, which is, things couldn't get any worse. I was at a friend's house and late at night, all of a sudden I started feeling a really bad chest pain. Like it literally felt like a heart attack. And I started feeling this weird thing all over my left side and I couldn't breathe. And I just had to lay down on the couch the rest of the night. And I was like, I have no idea what's going on. But I told my friend, I have to go home. I have to go home. I drove home and I was literally about to pass out the whole drive home. I probably shouldn't have drove home, but I did. And I was just so scared. I wanted to be with my parents. And I was just telling them, I don't know what's happening to me. I felt like it's a heart attack. People would say it's like angina. So it's like a pre-heart attack pretty much. And I remember that day, I thought I was going to die. So I got down on my knees. I was like, forgive me of all my sins. And like, just literally like, if this is it, and it was kind of stupid, but I didn't go to the hospital. I didn't have any money, insurance and stuff. I just decided to endure the pain until I could sleep it off. And I just knocked out. I eventually went to the hospital and then I was like, diagnosed with something called GERD, which is gastroesophageal reflux disease. I don't know what the hell that is. I never even heard of GERD before, and I never even had any heartburn, believe it or not. If I ever had heartburn, it must have been so subtle all these years I never even noticed it. But literally all these years, this is up until my 20s, I don't have any heartburn. And one day I have, boom, a big attack that felt like a heart attack. At the hospital, they told me, Josh, this is a very extreme version of it. So obviously that scared me even more. So I was taking a lot of medication. And so I had both the GERDs where I couldn't eat anything. I literally couldn't eat anything. Like the most I could probably do, I remember I had to change my entire diet. I could eat anything acidic, nothing. Um, yeah, couldn't drink like soda, eat Filipino food, Asian food. It's all oily, nothing, right? So I tried doing the Subway diet, and my Subway sandwich had like nothing on it. It just had the bread, the chicken breast, and lettuce. Even that screwed me up. Believe it or not, even that screwed me up. So I was like, man, what the heck? Like I'm trying to change everything. I'm supposed to stay away from ketchup and all this stuff. I'm just getting worse. And I had a little lifesaver. I have a memory where I had a lifesaver that screwed me up the whole day. One little tiny lifesaver candy. And basically, what happened ever since that attack in my chest, keep in mind, no issues before that. After that day, I had chest pain, heartburn, and vomit in my throat that I taste pretty much 24/7. I can honestly say it was pretty much 24/7. And I got extremely, extremely, extremely scared. Like I said, I changed my diet, I exercised to the best of my ability because I still had my back issues. And then I was wondering, what the heck is going on, God? Because I'm serving you. I'm a pastor. I think I'm a good guy. You know, are you doing this to test me? Right. So all these questions were going on in my mind, and I just didn't understand it because I cried myself to sleep. This grown man, I was already in like my mid 20s. I'm crying all the time, just wondering why does God seem to turn like a deaf ear, if he's such this loving God, So I was really struggling with that. Still didn't believe in the supernatural stuff, so I just did everything. I did physical therapy. I did acupuncture. My Asian friend said, do acupuncture, it works. It didn't work. I got worse. Physical therapy, I got worse. And I felt like my life was falling apart. And I just had so much fear every single day about my future, even wondering one day, oh, how will I have children? How do I carry a child? I can't, I can't even hold a laptop. How will I be able to play sports again? Like all these fears of just, man, how I felt like my life was over already in my 20s, not being able to eat and not being able to move properly. And everybody knew about it, Susanne, in my school, because I'm very vocal, right? So before class, any prayer requests, because this is a Christian school, it's a private school in California, everyone would pray for me. I got worse. Even after the prayers, I got worse. So that, like I said, none of this was making any sense to me if God answers prayer, right? And then I met a man in 2006, right? So this was a year later. And this was a man, I'll try to keep this part short. They call him the modern day Job. Now, those of you who are familiar with the biblical stories, keep that part short. Job is a guy that just suffered a lot in the Old Testament, right? So they call this guy a modern day Job. So I'm hearing this man named Willie Beeson speak, and they were saying that his miracle that he experienced was something known to the medical world, especially in America, And what happened to him is that his discs in his spine ruptured. He had 5 surgeries. When you have 1 surgery in your back, you're never the same. He had 5, and he had to get 2 more, so he had 7. And he had no blood flow, and he was in a wheelchair. So he's sharing to us this story. And remember, I don't believe any stories for 8 years, but I'm hearing this guy, and he looks completely healthy in front of me. He's not in a wheelchair. He's fully, he's strong and fit, but he was showing us pictures when he was scrawny because he was bedridden 22 hours a day, and not really a religious person. Then he has a near-death experience. He has an out-of-body experience, And like I said, I've heard all that stuff, right? Growing up as a kid, I loved it. When I was a skeptic, not so much. But when I heard this guy, and he says that he came back completely different, and his body looked completely different, and I started to be open. And I think it could have been also because I was so desperate at that point, Susanne. Like hearing his story gave me a lot of hope, especially because when I was listening to him, he wasn't a very dynamic speaker. He was very monotone, but he brought in a lot of documentation from UCLA, from Germany. So my mind's like, okay, he might be telling the truth. So I was very open to him. I approached him after. I told him about my back, and we exchanged information, and then he gave me the website where he received prayer from this one church. So I looked up that church after that, and I was already like, rolling my eyes. I'm like, oh man, that's the kind of church that I grew up in, and all the charismatic healing stuff, and there was testimonies of people getting healed of like headaches. I was like, big deal, supernatural, wow, headache, and then backs. Oh, okay, okay, probably wasn't that bad. Maybe just psychosomatic, mind over matter, kind of deal. That's just how my mind was thinking when I was reading these testimonies, and then are mentioning cancer, people being healed of cancer. I said, if that's true, if this claim is true, that is a big deal. And then I started to read stories about people whose arms were growing out. I was like, arms growing out? What the heck is that? It's like, is that like a whole arm missing, or like an arm just grew a little bit? What the hell does that mean? So I was, okay. I every time I share this story, Suzanne, I don't know how to explain this part, but I was extremely, 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 extremely confused. There was this rush of emotion, like, what is arms growing out? Like you could imagine, like my childhood experiences, my disappointment, my skepticism right here. And for the first time in 8 years, Suzanne, my desire to be healed came back for the first time in 8 years, because I didn't think about it, to be honest. It's just, okay, God loves me, accept who I am. And that's a good message too, right? But I'll be honest, at that moment, I was like, is it possible? And so I that day I shut the computer. I went to the prayer chapel and I cried. It's like, God, if you're doing this, what's going on? And I I eventually became very good friends with Willie Beeson, and he encouraged me with my journey. And to make a long story short, I revisited the topic of healing again for the first time in 8 years with a brand new lens, where I was open and I discovered that there were these other people in my eyes that were more legit, who were former skeptics who became full-on healers. And these are intellectuals, these are scholars. And so these guys were scholars who were, anti-supernatural back in the day, and then they became Christian supernatural, kind of thing. And they were sharing their testimonies. I never even heard of these guys until this point, So I would go to these healing events again, just like when I was a little kid, but with that new lens of, is this really happening? And maybe this stuff is real, And I just did that for so long, and I became convinced, okay, this is real. And how do I know it became real? Because my back and girds, my back is completely healed and my girds is completely gone. And that became a testimony for me, because if I just kept reading books about healing, if I kept going to events and hearing stories and stories of people getting miraculously healed and this and that, I'd still have a hard time believing, I think, because it'll just become like just head knowledge to me. Like, well, how do I really know? Because here I am. And that was 17, 18 years ago, Suzanne. I'm completely healed from that. And to let you know how I think my body is completely healed for sure is because I'm turning 43, soon. And I could eat whatever I want, whenever I want. It is 2:30 here in the morning. And I have a bunch of energy drinks here that I don't recommend people to drink, right? People don't want to drink that stuff. It's bad for you. I could drink that and go straight to sleep. Now, am I encouraging your audience to do it? Of course not. Of course not. To each his own, right? But what I'm saying is, I know people who are my age, they'll say, I can't even drink that. So that'll give me heart palpitation, Josh. Those energy drinks, those Red Bulls and stuff like that. So yeah, for you. But I remember back then in my 20s, I can't even eat a Lifesaver. And here I am. I could eat ice cream. I could eat a whole bucket of ice cream on the weekend with Remy. Thankfully she has a sweet tooth also. I could drink a lot of sodas and all these things, and I could go straight to sleep with no problem to this day, right? I bought a bunch of soda today too, earlier in grocery. So once again, I'm not telling your audience to do that, but I'm saying that this is quote unquote not normal for a lot of people's mentality who are my age, right? They say that's what we used to do back in college, Josh, or high school, but as you get older, you gotta slow down. I'm healthier than I was before. Even when I was in my 20s, I think I was even heavier, and but I would tell myself I can eat whatever I want, whenever I want. And so far, so good. 17 plus years later. And I do think it is what you get, what you believe. So I respect people's decision. Oh, I'll just eat this because it's good for me. Okay, there. It's good. Whatever works for you, right? But don't tell me that I can't eat my chips, because I love my chips. My wife knows how much I love chips, potato chips, oily chips, kettle chips, like I eat everything now, right? So that's happened to me. And then all of a sudden, I started getting really into healing, right? So I can still lift weights, right? So I'm just letting you know now, I can't even carry a laptop before I lifted weights today, right? So something happened, Suzanne, and all the listeners out there, that what is this? Is this a miracle? Well, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but something happened. My body definitely healed itself. Now, as I got into this world of healing, I started to once again just immerse myself in that whole world of the paranormal. So what happened was I started telling everybody about it, right? At school, at church, I was getting to a lot of people started getting really angry with me, like, "Yeah, you were the one that told us not to believe in this stuff, and now you're doing it." I'm like, "I know, I'm surprised too." So people literally got angry with me. Like they even said, "Josh, we're angry at you, because you told us all these years, don't believe this stuff. What's going on?" So they thought that I was going crazy, right? But they couldn't deny what happened to me, right? So in my school, they couldn't deny it either. So they wrote articles about it in the magazine. I would speak every semester at Biola University. That was my school, which is a very conservative school back in California in Orange County. Every semester, I spoke to introduce what's called the supernatural to these conservative Christians. And I would do demonstrations there in class, right, to prove to them that, hey, this stuff can happen. So people were getting healed. I did healing ministry on the campus where we would literally go around campus. We had a healing table. People would just come to my table and they would come for healing. And we would also walk around the whole campus looking for people to heal. And that caught the attention of the president. I shared my testimony with the president. He listened to my whole story. So I was very vocal. So you could see my personality. When I'm into something, I go all out and I would just love to share, right? But it also made a lot of people upset who just, they're not into these things. But as I got into the paranormal world, but we don't call it paranormal in Christianity. We just say supernatural, right?
Right.
Paranormal is new age, according to us back in the day, right? I was starting to have other types of experiences. So I started to feel people's pains on my body very normally. That was such a common thing that I didn't know what was happening to me. So every time I would do like be around people, all of a sudden I would get electricity all over my hands. I was like, what the heck? It's like burning. What the heck is this? And my friends would just say, that's Holy Ghost. Because that's our lingo, that's our filter at that time. We call it, you won't say energy, you'll say Holy Ghost. And I'll lay hands on people. And for the first time, Susanne, like, when I started doing it, I saw people get healed immediately. Pains would disappear. People would take off their casts on the spot. We have some of that stuff on video too, because I documented all this stuff even at my university. Um, they wrote articles about it, even at Biola as well. And so I was already showing that, okay, this stuff's happening. And I was also starting to feel people's pains.
Now you are an apologist of a different order.
Exactly. So my personality is still there. So now, and believe it or not, Susanne, because I did come from the apologetics world, and this is where people have seen this with me with my personality, I do like to explain and teach things and quote unquote prove, right? Not as much as, I don't do that as much now. My personality has been kind of like more relaxed because back then I'm just like so gung ho. I got to tell everybody, to the whole world. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to UCLA and speak to these skeptical crowds. I was always like that.
So do you think you were a zealot, and what softened you, whatever name you want to call what you were like?
Yeah, I was definitely, I could say the word passionate. That's the word that everybody uses for me. My whole family says that, even my colleagues. When I'm into something, I go all the way, no matter what subject it is. So all the things that you mentioned in my bio, I went all in with every one of those things. It's not just something I read a book. I've really had these experiences. I'm just very quiet about it in the sense of like YouTube, talking about it online. Like it was years before I started mentioning like all this out of body stuff on my channel, but I've been experiencing out of body travel for like the longest time, but I'm very like these days I'm just more, okay, just let me pick and choose and be careful, but back then I was just like, yeah, I'm going to tell everybody, maybe that's like my missionary heart, I guess, like, that I came to the Philippines as a missionary, but
we haven't even mentioned that you did missionary work. I mean, you
yeah.
All in. And so can you tell us a contrast between the law of attraction and the law of assumption, and why you want to teach those and are teaching those very successfully? I think you even have a class starting up pretty soon. So how are they different? Because I know a lot of people that I've come across, they're doing some of the practices of law of attraction, but they don't take it much further.
Yeah. So law of attraction or law of assumption. A lot of people are familiar with law of attraction, right? And but not everyone's familiar with law of assumption, which is mostly well known because of someone named Neville Goddard, who is right behind me back there. I have a face of him back there, but he's had a huge influence on my life. But to be honest, when I started learning about the law of attraction and the secret, it wasn't new to me, Susanne, because when I grew up in charismatic Christianity, we taught those things. We just didn't use the lingo of vibration, frequency. We never talk like that in the church, but we did do name it and claim it. So naming it and claiming it is like, okay, if you want to be healed, you speak it right now in Jesus' name. So you claim it, right? We spoke the prosperity message, where, you speak abundance and I'm rich in Jesus' name, things like that. Very similar, like in affirmations, we would use Bible verses where the Apostle Paul talks about you speak things that are not as though they were, right? And that's law of attraction, law of assumption, where you speak things into reality. So when I was criticizing the charismatic movement during those 8 years, I was very familiar with the metaphysical teachers at that time, trying to tell people that, hey, you Christians are influenced by these new thought people. To me, new thought people were bad back then, right? They were like unbiblical, and metaphysical and all that stuff, woo-woo stuff. But then when I started to, move away from my fundamentalist Christian faith, I started to go back to those metaphysical teachers, those new thought teachers who, some of them even do identify as Christian. I'm like, oh, this doesn't make sense. And it is biblical. It is in the Bible somehow. And yeah, so law of attraction is basically like attracts like. So whatever you think about, you attract something of similar kind. Law of assumption has a different kind of lingo, the semantics. It's more of like whatever is it that you want or you want to be, you assume it. Now, how do you assume it? If you want something, you got to feel that you are it, or you got to feel that you already have it. So that's what it means to, as Neville Goddard likes to say, you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Beautiful language. I love Neville. It's so poetic. But yeah, if you want something, if you were to ask your listeners, okay, if they want something, here's how to get it. Live it. That's it. You got to be it. Oh, well, what the heck does that mean, Josh? Right? Because I don't see it. I don't see the money in front of me. I don't see the healing in my body. Well, I'll give you an example. How did I heal my back? So obviously I was in tremendous pain and I had a hard time, right? Physically speaking, I couldn't do a lot of things. But here's what I can do. I could go within my imagination. And this is what I was doing as a Christian. I didn't even know who Neville Goddard was in 2006. So what I did was I would go to this church that was literally down the street of my house in college. And I wanted to prove to God that I was super spiritual at the time. So I would go after midnight because it's a 24-hour prayer. And these Koreans down the street are like hardcore. It's literally 24-hour prayer. I would go there like at 2 a.m. to try to impress God, let them think that I'm serious and stuff. But I would go there and it's like a dimmed sanctuary. It's a mega church. And I would go in the sanctuary. There's like a little worship music going on. And what I would do is that because of what I was taught in charismatic healing Christianity, I would just go with it. Obviously, in this 3D physical world, I'm in a lot of pain and there's a lot of stuff I can't do. But if I can go within, and if everything already exists, what I would do is I would imagine myself not just walking, but I could feel myself running. I could feel myself and my feet touching the floor. I could feel myself with the wind blowing against me. And I'm running in my imagination within myself, right? I was feeling the reality of it. And then I was imagining myself eating hamburgers, pizza, oily Filipino food, Asian food, tasting it in my mouth, no problem. And that's how my body was healed. And the day that I found out that I was healed, Susanne, I still remember the day. It's wild. I went to the cafeteria because when we lived at school, it's like a buffet pretty much. And I went to the cafeteria. It's like, all right, if I'm genuinely healed, I feel okay, right? I was taking 8 pills a day, Susanne. Imagine, as a college student, so I'm always like knocked out in class, right? Um, I felt healed one day. And as a step of faith, I'll just eat whatever I want. I grabbed the hamburger, I grabbed the pizza, I ate the French fries and the ice cream. No, nothing. No side effects, nothing whatsoever. And I looked at my friends at the table because everybody knew my condition. I'm healed, you guys. And we all started talking about it. We were walking out of the cafeteria. And I said, you guys, I'm completely healed. And that day, cold turkey, stopped all my medication, right? Never came back. 17, 18 years ago. Right?
Well, what do you say to people that go, well, that's all and good for you, but I've tried everything and I've visualized and all that stuff. I'm just going to give up because I don't want to be disappointed again. What is it that they may have missed and should give a try?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when people say, what should I do? Well, I said, you have a choice. This is what, when people come to me for healing, right? I said, what should I do? I said, well, you have a choice. Do you want to get healed or do you not? If you don't want to, if you feel too frustrated, okay, you don't have to get healed. You could just accept the way that you are. No one's forcing you. But if you want to be healed, don't give up, first of all, right? So for me, I had that strong desire because my life, I felt like it was ruining my whole life in my mid-20s. So if you want to get healed, here's what you do. Because this is a struggle, I think, when it comes to a religious mentality that I had. So when I was struggling, I believed in what's called a theistic God. A theistic God is a God that's out there, right? God's a creator, I'm the creation, but we're separate, right? So I would pray to my heavenly Father, right? Heavenly, it's weird. It's like this oxymoron, like God's in my heart, but I'm looking up all the time. Like, Jesus is my heart, but Heavenly Father, but he's supposedly in my heart all the time. So a little kind of confusing. But I remember if there is this God, right? Let me give another example. People literally beg me for healing sometimes, Susanne, in emails.
I'm sure they do. You've had
I even got some, even earlier this week, I even got some. And people literally offer me money. I'll give you 100 grand, Josh, if you can do it. Like literally, I get those kind of emails. And they're begging me. And they would say, Josh, I believe that with God, all things are possible, right? But I want you to heal me. So here they are, they're Christian. They believe God is a God of miracles, and they're begging me for healing. There's something weird about that, because when you think about it, right? If God is omnipresent, as Christians claim, now I'm just trying to approach this from a Christian worldview, right? If God is omnipresent, he's everywhere. He's in your heart. You could talk to him anytime you want, and God is all powerful. Not only is God all powerful according to Christians, he's also omnibenevolent. He's also all loving. If God sees you suffering 24/7 for days, weeks, months, years, he has the power to do it. Why isn't he doing it? And he's all powerful. You don't have to ask me. You don't have to beg me, right? Why are you begging someone all the way in another state in the US of A at the time? But you have a direct connection to God, who's supposedly in your heart, who is all powerful. And why don't you just turn to God to do it? So those were the questions that I would flip around to the people. And get them to see that maybe we're not thinking about this the right way, right? Because I was becoming totally dependent upon, quote unquote, an external being, even though there's a cognitive dissonance because I say he's still in my heart, right? Even though he's not external to me. But there was this confusion because he's all loving to me. He's watching me cry every night, struggling. People are praying for me at school, even the professors. It felt like the professors' prayers weren't working. And all of a sudden, I learned about healing, the power of the mind, and my body healed itself like that. What's going on? So I'm telling people that, okay, I'm not here to condemn anybody. We all go through shit in our life, right? We all go through challenges in our life. Many of us wrestle with doubts. I noticed that when I first got into healing, of course, there had to be a reconditioning of my mind because I was a huge critic of it. So of course, like even when I was reading all these healing books after that 8-year period when I was getting kind of open, of course I have that skepticism, like really hardcore skepticism still in me thinking, man, I don't want to get deceived again, man. What am I doing? But then I get back into it because I want to get healed, right? I was trying to see if this is really working. So my point is that I do believe, as Neville Goddard says, that we are the operant power. You are. Not some external God. Because if it is based upon some God that you have to pray to, God seems very selective, in my opinion, right? Does God answer prayer? Yes, but it comes down to what do we mean by God and what do we mean by prayer? Because when I think about just the things in life that we ask for on a daily basis, God, I went to the mall today and I got a parking spot. I manifested a parking spot. God answered my prayer. But yet there's this person dying of cancer in your home. God seems pretty selective and heartless to me. I think it's a lot more important than your parking spot. You know what I'm saying? And
Yes.
so all that I know is that I can speak from my own experience, Susanne, is that I had to change my way of thinking, believe and feel the reality that I'm already healed, not that I'm going to be healed one day, right? Even that one day, I don't even use that. But if you could feel the reality of it now, somehow, some way, because you're experiencing it in your consciousness, just like I was experiencing myself running and my legs were perfectly fine and my back was okay. I was breakdancing in my imagination. I was eating everything. As Neville Goddard says, whatever you experience in imagination, your body will follow also. The physical will follow. And that's where Neville talks about, this is what I love about him, beautiful language. He says there's a difference between thinking of versus thinking from. Thinking of versus thinking from. What the heck does that mean? If you think of something, let's just say you want a new house. If you want to think of a new house that you want to have, what does that imply? If you're just thinking of a new home that you want, it implies that you don't have it because you're just thinking of it, right? It's just a flat image in your head, right? But if you're thinking from your new home, what does that mean? That proves that you're in it, where you've entered into the image and you've given it substance. What does that mean? Because now you're able to see your bedroom right in front of you, first person point of view. You're able to touch that sofa. You could literally feel the texture of that sofa in your new living room. You could taste the food in your new kitchen. You could hear your children playing in your brand new backyard. In other words, you're using all of your senses, and ultimately you're feeling the reality of it. And if you're able to go there in consciousness, as Neville says, if everything is imagination, then you must be where you are in imagination. You're really there. It just hasn't, quote unquote, physicalized here in this 3D world. But if you go there long enough, this is a point that I want to make with your listeners, because a lot of people forget this or they don't know this. So I'll even clarify this part. If I tell people, what's the secret to manifesting? They'll say, it's feeling, Josh. Okay, good. Feeling is a secret. That's the title of Neville Goddard's book. But believe it or not, Susanne, a lot of people don't know what that means, because I'll ask them, okay, so define feeling for me. It's like, you got to raise your vibration, be really, really happy all the time. Really? So I say, yeah, Josh, you got it. It's the emotion. And I don't blame them, because I think some LOA teachers teach that. This is the part where I disagree with them. Okay. It's when Neville talks about feeling, he's not talking about emotion at all. Okay, this is something that I'll clarify with people. When Neville's talking about feeling, he's talking about the acceptance of the fact that your desire is already yours. That's it. The acceptance of the fact that your desire is already yours. Because would you tell someone who just went to a stinking funeral, you got to be super happy if you want to pay your bills and, all that stuff for the funeral, or someone going through some things, some dark time in their life. No, people who are depressed who are stinking millionaires. Now, I'm not telling you to be depressed, right? And people who are even good people, happy vibe people, who are stinking poor, right? So it's not about that. It's about states of consciousness. And a state of consciousness is a way of being. You can be stinking depressed in a state of depression, but you could also be at the same time in a state of abundance to be like, money is easy for me. But yeah, I'm not happy though. Yeah, but you're in a state of depression, but you're also in a state of wealth, right? So all you have to do is everything is a state. There are infinite states in this world: health, wealth, poverty, riches, sadness, depression, anger, violence. Everything is a state. You'll know how to manifest it if you can feel the reality of that state, right? So you can be a sad person and still feel the reality that, yeah, money's easy for me because I got a job, duh, things like that, right? And there's other people who are like these happy people doing affirmations and stuff like that. It's great, but they're not genuinely feeling the reality of whatever the thing that they want in their lives, whether it's more money.
Not just good vibes only, feeling good feelings to manifest. It's feeling the reality.
Feeling the reality.
Have the thing or the situation.
Exactly.
Desire. Feeling the reality.
I'll give a very simple example. If I were to ask you, what time is it there, Susan?
11:53 a.m.
Okay. What are you going to have for lunch?
Chicken salad.
Okay. See, so you just thought about it. No big deal. But it's already a done deal in your mind. So you don't have to do a technique. You don't have to do a visualization board of chicken salad on the board, or I'm going to eat chicken salad. I'm going to eat chicken. People do these affirmations and techniques. You don't need to do techniques. You know why you don't need to do a technique? Because you already believe you're going to have chicken salad for lunch. The reason why people need to do all of these fancy, interesting techniques is because people don't believe, right? But just naturally speaking, I want a glass of water. Do I need to think about a glass of water for a long time? No, it's just a thought in my head for a second. And all I do is just walk to the fridge and I get a glass of water, because believe it or not, that's a manifestation too. People don't think of it as a manifestation, but yeah, you tell that to people who are living in countries who don't have clean water. Everything is a manifestation. So people are constantly manifesting. When people say, Josh, I don't know how to manifest. Of course you do. You're manifesting that bad life that you don't like right now, or you're manifesting that good thing that you do like. You're assuming all the time because you're feeling the reality of something. So even if you do an affirmation like I'm rich, I'm rich, I'm rich, I'm rich, I'm rich, you do it for 30 minutes, you do it for an hour, beautiful. But then the rest of the 17 hours throughout the day, you're thinking about bills, you're talking to your friends about life's hard. And so your inner conversations throughout the day are not matching your wish fulfilled, right? So what I want to really emphasize, and I think what people tend to miss, is that you want to imagine whatever it is that you want, that you already have it, to the point of naturalness, to the point of naturalness. Now, what does that mean? So Neville gives an example. It's like, so when Neville had a nice brand new suit, he actually said that when he got this brand new suit and he was wearing it around New York City, he felt like everyone was staring at him, right? And I know the feeling like when you buy a new hat or whatever. So are they looking at my hat, or things like that? We get so conscious about it because we're not used to it yet. It's not natural yet. But then Neville talks about how he wore his new suit to the point where he just puts it on, he doesn't even think about it anymore. But that's the way it is with these states of consciousness. When you're struggling with poverty for a long time and you're putting on this new state of wealth, how do you put on this new state of wealth? By imagining and feeling the reality of wealth, right? You could feel this sense of abundance all of a sudden, but then when you kind of open your eyes and you look at your reality, then you feel sad again, right? You want to keep going within. Neville says frequency. It's about the frequency. You keep going within until it feels natural. So when you're done doing your techniques, you still feel that abundance in your life, right?
Gosh.
So when you do a technique and you say, hey, okay, let's go watch a movie, even though you don't only have X amount of money in your bank account, oh, but I got other bills to pay. Well, if you're abundant, right, you're not going to be worried about that stuff, right? Now, I know this can sound very irresponsible, but when you think about it, right, let's just say someone only has $50 in their account or $10 in their wallet. What are you going to, how long is that $10 going to last you? I mean, come on, when you really think about it. So even if you're so uptight with it and you're penny pinching, I'd say if you can live an abundant life, even with that $10 and you give it away, you better believe that that abundance, you're in a state of consciousness where somehow, some way, something's going to come to match that because but if you're holding on to that $10, I mean, like, okay, you could buy a meal. Okay. But then it's gone now, but you're living so tight. Right. So my point is that you enter a state of consciousness because whatever state you're in, because we're all in a state, we're in multiple states at the same time, whatever state you're in, not what you want, whatever state you're in, whatever you feel, that's what manifests in your life. And that's what I'm telling people. You want to manifest something, feel the reality of it and stay in that state of consciousness until it feels so natural to you. You don't even have to think about it anymore. And you're going to start to see everything start to match.
Well, what do you say to people that think maybe this isn't happening for me because I'm not worthy of it? One of our listeners sent in that question, and for some background, she was taught through religion, pray for others. And then maybe once in a while you can pray for something for yourself, but pray for others. And if you pray for yourself, she interpreted that to mean she was being selfish. And so how do you square that for people that, they come into your class and you're teaching them all these things, but then they really can't do it. They can't immerse in, I feel it as though I already have this thing because maybe I'm not supposed to because I'm not good enough.
Yeah. So here's a shocker. Here's an eye opener. It doesn't matter how quote unquote good you are. It doesn't matter how quote unquote bad you are, of how we perceive good and bad to be. Now, let me clarify though. This person has a religious background, right?
Yes.
So Neville's language might be kind of a stretch for some religious people because he'll say you are God, right? And they'll be like, whoa, Christians will say that's a little bit too much. But I'll just say this to that person. You're a child of God. God is in you. You're the righteousness of God in Jesus Christ. So who are you? You're the righteousness of God. You're a daughter of the King, a son of the King, whoever you are. It's not about being worthy because everything that you need, everything that you desire is already in you. It's already found in Christ. All you need to do is believe. This is what grace is, right? But in the ultimate sense, I'll take it a step further because I don't even really ultimately think like that in that kind of framework. We are I am. Who are you? Whatever you say I am is to yourself. I am this, I am that. But ultimately, as Neville says, God, we are all God who is the occupant of every state of consciousness, right? That we're experiencing in our lives. So for that person, I'd say, know who you are. That's the first thing, because I don't want to just get into a bunch of techniques. No, do this technique, do that technique, affirmation. Know who you are. You are I am, the infinite, right? As Neville even says, the infinite God, right? That could be a stretch for some people. But okay, let's tone it down a bit. God is inside you. You are loved. It doesn't matter how good or bad you are. The law is neutral. That's why it's a law. Gravity doesn't matter if you're a quote unquote good or bad person. A law is a law. It's just a matter of applying that law for your benefit, right? Because that's the thing. You can look at people who do some shady things in this world. They make money, they have good health, and there's a lot of people who are like good people. You're like, man, why do they gotta suffer so much? And you realize that, so we what I'm trying to get people to do is to not theologize, meaning that we try to explain things away to justify our suffering. I'll give an example for that. So when I was struggling with money, when my wife and I were struggling with money for a long time as missionaries, Susanne, I did everything I could to theologize and explain it away because I just didn't know how to understand it, because I felt like we were serving and doing good, right? Just like when I was suffering with my sickness at that time. So for years when we were missionaries, and I felt so inadequate, Susanne. Like, I mean, just imagine we just got married and I want to give her a good life and I'm barely making anything less than $1,000 a month. It was hard for me to make $1,000 a month. I remember. And sometimes someone just give me a $20 donation. I'm like, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? And then people watching my videos on Christianity saying, I want my money back, Josh. And what are you getting into this heretical stuff? And I told Remy one time, I said, Rem, someone's asking for their money back. Uh, are you ready for this life? She said, I'm ready, Josh. That's why I love my wife so much. She stood by me. And because I remember
Well,
I wasn't going to preach.
Jesus was considered heretical in his
Oh,
time.
exactly. So that's
Not
what
that
I knew.
I know that you'd be uncomfortable being compared to Jesus like anybody would, but
Yeah.
it's who's going to stand up, who's going to be part of our spiritual evolution if we're all afraid of being canceled.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that I told myself. Honestly, Susanne, if I were to even just reflect on what you were just mentioning. So when I was first new here back in 2009, my name was spreading around the Philippines, especially in Manila, because it's like, who's this new young guy telling people that they can heal when they didn't go through the pastors and the training here at these mega churches? So I was already, with the mega churches here, they even put my face on the screen in the mega churches saying, beware of this false teacher, heretic. And my friends were the ones at those servers like, Josh, you were on the screen today, And I remember telling myself, okay, so I stopped going to these churches, these mega churches, because they were scared of me, and they were texting people on their phones, stay away from Josh. He's a cult leader and things like that. It was wild, dude, especially the first year. And I remember telling Remy at one point, I said, Rem, I'm not going to speak at churches anymore because I'm not going to compromise where I'm at. I'm just going to do YouTube. They can't stop me from doing YouTube. So that's what I went all in at that time, focusing on, we call it Christian deconstruction, where we're just kind of breaking down and digging deeper into the history of our beliefs and things like that. And I was always about you can't put me in a box. I think that's some of the struggles that churches have had with me. And people have told me this, like, Josh, you can't handle a church. And I said, I love people, but the institution, it's been a challenge for me because they're always making me conform to their denominations and their creeds. And Josh, if you get ordained with this denomination, we'll take care of your home. We'll get you a car. I said, no. I remember that time back in the day. I said, no, I don't want to get ordained. And just because you're going to give me a house and a car. And I just said, no, my way of thinking is, I know I'm constantly evolving because that's just how I am. I'm open. And yeah, so my life really changed to just learn that the power is within me, just to try to answer that person's question. So whoever you are with that question, if you want to be healed, don't give up, but just know that the power that's in me that healed my body is the same power that's in you for you to be able to do whatever it is that you're wanting, right? It's healing that this person is looking for. Yeah.
I think so. It's really
Yeah.
just a question of, I think it boils down to, should you pray for yourself? Should you manifest for yourself, or is that selfish?
Oh, selfish, right? Yeah. So I would look at it like this. So I think that's the thing with religion, right? Unfortunately, is that we kind of create a list, like God first, people, then I'm last, I'm at the bottom. Like, that's the
Right.
life of Christ or whatever. And I look at everything just like a circle. It's all connected, So when you're serving yourself, you're really serving eventually going to serve other people. When you're doing something for someone else, you're actually doing it for yourself, for God, right? If we're all one, if everything is, we're talking about unity and oneness in the ultimate sense. Yeah. So I think this is where, uh, you know, the religious mindset, unfortunately, has really impacted our lives, where we don't think about ourselves. We're always like for myself, Susanne, I was always like serving, no matter what, even when I was suffering physically, suffering financially. I was always about like, that's the way God would want to be honored, because I got to obey. And I think that did a lot of damage to us, to myself, to my marriage. And uh, yeah, I just know that that kind of thinking wasn't as helpful. So I know that the power is in our hands. God is in you. If I were to tell it to this person, God is in you. And when you pray, here's prayer. It's assumption. Prayer, you could do it in the traditional sense where you're talking to some deity that's outside of you. But then once again, how do you know if you're going to get it? Because God's very selective, right? Maybe it's his will. Maybe it's not his will. Maybe it's not God's timing. I'll give you an example that just popped up. When I did demonstrations here back in 2009, and I won't mention the demonstration because it's really out of the box. It's very weird. But I called someone up to the front, this girl up to the front, and this is in front of an audience. And I said, okay, I want you to do a healing on this person. So she tried it in front of this audience, and it didn't happen. This person didn't experience that thing that they're all expecting. So I said, okay. And I kind of expected that too, that nothing was going to happen. So I was trying to teach them a lesson. So I was like, all right, you guys. So now nothing happened. So what do we do now, you guys? Here's what we would naturally think. Maybe it's not God's will. Maybe it's not God's time, right? That's how we would theologize it. Now I said, now watch this. And then I grabbed the person's legs, and whatever this thing that I'm doing, boom, it happened. Huh. Then I went to the audience, and everyone's like laughing and tripping out. I said, so what happened? Did God all of a sudden change his mind in just a couple of seconds? Or did I believe? Right? So there's a difference. So I get it that we are the operant power. So I know, as a coping mechanism, because I know it was a coping mechanism for myself, that when I wasn't healed, I needed something to help me justify that I'm not healed. But it wasn't until I understood, don't give up, Josh. Keep believing in the reality, keep feeling it. And because we are God. God leaves it up to us, whatever we want in this life, And this is what I wanted. It's like what Neville says, what do you want? At the end of every message. I love that, because that really smashes a lot of people who think that you can't get things that you desire. It's only what you need. No. Neville says, what do you want? He says, once you know what you want, he says, whatever, you want to be famous? He's like, nothing wrong with that. You want more money? Nothing wrong with that. He says, anyone can judge you. Just follow the golden rule, but know what you want and assume it. Feel the reality of it, right? Until you have those sensations, right? Until you feel the tones of reality, right? Those sensations that I was talking about earlier. It's like telling someone, can you taste a lemon in your mouth right now? And then you can taste it. We just did a healing not too long ago from someone at Starbucks here, Susanne. We became good friends with one of the baristas. She watched my videos on YouTube. I didn't know that. She approached me afterwards outside of Starbucks. And then she was telling me how she had GERDs. She's like, Sir Josh, they say sir here a lot. Like, Sir Josh, I saw your test. I also have GERDs. I have this taste in my mouth and acid. I said, okay, can you taste a lemon in your mouth right now? And she said, yeah. I said, but where's the lemon? There's no lemon here. But how'd you do that? Right. And I gave her all these different sensations to feel, smelling a rose, but there's no rose in her hand. But she could taste the lemon. She could feel a tennis ball in her hand. You can't pick up a distinct scent of nothing. You can't feel a distinct feeling of nothing, of a tennis ball in your hand, like the rubbery, fuzzy. You could imagine that in your mind, and you could feel the ball in your hand. You could feel a piece of silk. But how do you do that? There's nothing in your hand, because you're experiencing it in your consciousness. So I told this to this one girl when we were outside of Starbucks. I said, what do you want to do? Sir, I want to go eat Korean barbecue, but I can't because of, it's spicy and all that. I said, okay, you try this tonight and you tell me what happens. The following week, she came up to me, said, Josh, it worked. It's like, I ate so much Korean food. I even drank alcohol. It didn't affect me. I was like, all right, it's up to you. But, and she started telling everybody at Starbucks about it, because she felt the reality of it. She didn't over intellectualize it and try to say, because especially here in the Philippines, I think we're more open to these things too. The supernatural, so to speak. unlike especially in America, right? We're more intellectualizing things, and that has a role in life, right? Our rationale has a role in life, but in things like this, we got to live from the heart. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, it works, you guys. I would just tell that person, don't give up. And God's not judging you. So stop judging yourself. It's not about whether or not you're good or bad. That's irrelevant. You're God's child. It's just a matter of you not giving up and persisting until you feel the naturalness of it.
This is really beautiful. I feel like we're getting a class right now, and it's just a taste of what you offer. It's just a taste of it. Janet is here and has a question. Hello? I'm going to let her ask. Okay, I think your voice is on now, Janet. What would you like to ask Joshua? I didn't read your question because I was so listening to him.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Janet. I can hear you.
Hi, this is a great talk. This is actually, it's, just super, this is really good information, really good specific stuff that I need. One of the things I was wondering is, how do you deal with negative thoughts or feelings? So how do you let them go, especially if it's something like physical pain or like any external situation that you don't have immediate control of? So is there something you do to let go of that feeling? The
negative thoughts and negative feelings?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to give advice that's going to be contrary to what a lot of LOA people teach, because I think this is one of the dangers in the positive thinking movement, is that we always just tell people think positively about things. But I'm going to tell you, with those negative thoughts and those negative feelings, it just depends what they are, I guess, on how severe you're talking about them. But I would encourage you to feel them, right? Because we're human and we go through challenge in our lives. We experience anger, we experience hate, jealousy. And I think a lot of times we just tend to just shut it off, to think that that's the right thing to do, not realizing that we're actually suppressing what's going on inside of us. Now, I'm not saying that those negative things are good. I'm just saying that those negative, quote unquote, negative feelings that you have are there, and they need to be felt in order for you to eventually let them go, right? Mm-hmm. So one of my, I don't know if I'm answering, because I want to unpack this, but am I kind of going in the direction that you're looking for?
Yeah, I think it's just like, I think there's kind of acknowledging the negative feeling or the pain or whatever it is. Yeah. But then there's also this point of obsessing over it, where you run it through your mind over and over again. And I'm just wondering how to shift that, like, pain, like shifting, pain or negative thoughts. Like, how do you shift from that?
Good. Yeah.
But still acknowledging it.
Yeah, good. So the acknowledgement part, I'll dig a little deeper into that. So Neville even talks about your body being like a filter. So we all of us, even myself, I've experienced trauma. I'm sure a lot of people who are listening have experienced trauma in their lives, and so many strong emotions. And what we need to do is not just acknowledge it and say, I'm angry, but actually feel the pain, right? Mm-hmm. And I know that might be contrary to the advice that positive thinkers would do, but let me give you an example why. So this is something that I haven't really even gone public with, but I only share this privately. So this is special for you guys, right? But so when I share my testimony of my GERD and of my back, that's something that I would share in all these podcasts, right? Like everywhere I go, okay, here's a miracle story of Josh. His GERD and his back was healed and gone. But believe it or not, throughout the years, you guys, I struggled with, I would have cysts on my body, right? You guys know a cyst, right? I would have a cyst on my foot and I would have a cyst on my back that would come and go throughout the years. This is so weird. It would disappear and it would appear. I was like, what the heck, dude? And then I would have a really bad cough once a year for years. All this time that I'm this healer, but I wouldn't talk about it, right? And I was like, man, why is my cough coming when I'm about to do a speaking engagement? Like it's like the worst time, right? And like I was mentioning earlier, I've been through a lot of shit in my life, if you don't mind me using that language. And I've had a lot of people leave me, a lot of friends, like I could say 95% of my friends, they disappeared, struggle a lot financially. And yeah, just even had challenges in my marriage at times and had that condition with the cysts and stuff. And you know what? All those years, I was always happy. Strange, right? I was always positive. but yet I would have these symptoms that were just always there throughout the years that I would just, why can't these go away like completely, you know? And I didn't realize that I was such a positive person because I was suppressing everything, you know? And I would be like, yeah, it's like, I would learn stuff about like trauma and suppression and repression. And I was realizing, like, I remember first hearing about this, like there's a lot of rage in me. There's a lot of anger. I'm like, I'm not angry. I'm like the most positive guy you'll ever meet, right? I don't feel anger. I don't feel rage. That's the word, rage. I don't feel rage. And then I realized, exactly, I don't feel the rage because I've been suppressing it all this time. My brain does this defense mechanism to protect me, distracting me from all those strong emotions that are going on inside of me and giving me symptoms to distract me from my strong emotions of my anger and my rage and all these other things that are going on in my life that I've suppressed for so many years. So I would see all these symptoms that I would never understand. Here I am putting on a happy face, trying to be the positive law of attraction guy, positive thinking guy, healing guy. But yet in private, I would have the cyst and the cough. Once a year, I would have this cough. And I remember just thinking like, what the heck is that all about? Then I realized that those were just responses to something that was going on inside. So even though verbally I say, yeah, I'm okay, I'm not angry, right? My body was saying no, because what I've learned, people may not agree with this, but I've learned that our body is our subconscious, right? Our body is a reflection of what's actually really going on inside. So when someone's like, I'm good, and then they're sick in bed, they're not good. They're probably suppressing something because your body is constantly giving you messages. So when I would get these cysts in my bodies, on my foot and on my back, or I would get this cough, if I look back now, I remember I was under a lot of pressure, right? Yeah. For whatever, it was a speaking engagement. Oh my God, speaking engagement, I get nervous. I got to make sure everything's okay. Why do I get a cough right before, or do a webinar, something like that. And other things. And then I realized like the personality type that I am, it's very similar to a lot of other people who are perfectionists, people who are very driven, people who are what we call goodists. Goodists are people who are, we take care of people. You get in a fight with your spouse, but you put on a happy face because you just don't want to make sure everything's okay. So we're good people. I think I'm a good person, not realizing that I'm suppressing a lot of things inside. Right. I don't feel it. I don't feel the anger. I don't feel the rage because it's suppressed. But my brain is diverting my attention by bringing my attention to my physical body. So I don't think about all that shit that I've been through, all those emotions. That's why I'm not angry at that guy or that person that hurt me or talked behind my back, because I'm so distracted with all my symptoms.
Are you saying then, Joshua, are you saying that it's possible that the negative thoughts seem obsessive a bit because they haven't had a healthy outlet? Or they haven't been completely released. And
so everything's energy, right? So everything is some sort of discharge. So if there's a strong emotion, especially someone who's been abandoned, right? That's why even people who are in adoption, who are adopted, they suffer a lot of symptoms too. They have these abandonment issues, people who are sexually molested and abused. There's this traumas that go on and they don't talk about it. They don't feel it. So they'll realize, why do I get sick a lot? Or why do I have this skin condition? And I'm not here to make judgment about people that were good or bad people. It's just the way the mind body works, right? Because our body is constantly giving us messages saying, this is not balanced. You're not in balance, whatever it may be, and that's why I've realized throughout the years is that people who have a lot of physical symptoms, it happens to a lot of people that are what's called the years of responsibility, which is like 30s, 40s, and early 50s. It's the years of people getting married, people getting divorced, people losing loved ones, moving to a new home, figuring out their career. And they're the ones that have all the back pain and all these symptoms. And the old people are not having all these herniations in their backs and this problem. No, it's the young people, because we're so driven. We're so much about image too, like on social media. So we're just like covering all the stuff that's really going on inside. But to go back to Janet's thing though, is that my point is that you have something negative. If you have a negative feeling, let's just talk about a feeling. Let's just say sadness. My best friend passed away last year, literally my best friend since birth. And I already understood this way of thinking that I'm sharing now. And I let my rage out. I was angry. But my old Josh would be sad at times, but I think I, for the most part, try to keep a happy face, because I just try to stay positive because like attracts like, should think like that back in the day. But I've learned that there's a sense of balance we got to have in our lives. And I remember feeling the anger, and I would tell my wife, I would tell even people at the funeral when I did the eulogy, I said, I'm really angry. And I expressed some of my anger, and realizing that you need to feel those things until they no longer need to be felt. So I'm not saying that jealousy is good. I'm not saying rage is good. It's just emotion. And try not to look at your emotions as good or bad. Just look at it as just human responses to things in life. And what you do is that you feel it. You feel that anger to somebody that just hurts you, right? It's not natural to just be all lovey-dovey to someone who's talking bad about you. But if you feel angry towards that person, you could feel that in your mind, but you feel it until you're able to feel it to the point where you can transmute it, where you could offer some sort of forgiveness eventually. It doesn't have to be right away, because it's a process, right? But you got to feel it though, because it's like a bottle. It's like a cup. You fill something up, that lid that you're trying to keep all that stuff down, that's your symptoms, right? You got to open it up. You got to let it be discharged. So every time there's too much emotion, and that's why you don't have a symptom. Sometimes the symptoms in our bodies are symbolic, right? Like stabbing. When I think about the stabbing in my back pit, I got quote unquote stabbed in the back, by a lot of people, right? So now to get to her other point in her negative thinking. Now, in the ultimate sense, it also has to do with reprogramming. So as Neville even talks about it, you gotta, it's like taming a horse. We're not going to say it's completely easy, because a lot of it has to do with our programming, the way we were raised, whether it's about money, whether it's about our value. If you would never been told that we're loved or we're nothing, you're stupid, or obviously that could take some time to recondition your brain to accept the new truth. So my first advice would be to feel whatever it is you need to feel, right? Because that's just a natural response of what's going on inside. But you feel it to the point where you transmute it either to forgiveness, you're able to let it go and to forgive, right? Doesn't have to be right away. I want to emphasize that because it could take time. But at the same time, then you can replace it. You can start replacing those negative thoughts. I could just give a very simple one. If your negative thought is about money, like you always feel like, oh man, I'm always going to be poor. Oh man, because we're always poor in our home. Then you flip it. And then you just turn it to something positive. So you take the reverse, as Neville talks about it. He says, revise it. It's the power of revision. So you take that negative and you turn it to something positive. So if your negative thought is like, oh man, am I going to be sick the rest of my life? Then you just flip it. And you don't say that I'm going to be healed. You say I'm healed. Why? Right. Because you're experiencing it. If you could feel the reality of it. Neville says that you want to live in the end, not live in the process. You want to live in the end. So you don't think about, all right, so if I want some money, where am I going to get some money? I could ask my cousin, I could sell this object. No. What would it feel like if you already had the money? You go straight to the end, right? So Neville talks about that. When you go straight to the end, the means will take care of itself because of the bridge of incident, And I went off on a tangent.
You're right in line with what I was hearing was no self-judgment for that feeling that you perceive as negative. Just move into, in a way, honoring feeling. And that's a processing. So the unprocessed stuff can be a barrier to assuming, what is rightfully yours in this world. So, I feel I've taken a little advantage of you here by
it's okay.
letting you teach, but
Oh, could I add one more thing before I forget?
Please.
My cysts are gone and the coughing that doesn't come back anymore. Totally, I have to throw that in. So literally the cysts completely disappeared. No surgery, nothing ever since I learned this stuff. So there might be something to it.
That's pretty remarkable. And thanks for being so open here for the group too. I understand that you have an offer for people that are interested in learning more. And how do we reach you and how do we take advantage of that offer?
Awesome. Yeah. So I appreciate Susanne. So you could just go to my website. It's just joshuatongol.com. That's my website that has everything on there. But I did create a course, and I just created a couple months ago. It's my Neville Goddard course that I could literally say it was years in the making, right? Because I've been teaching Neville for quite some time. And when I got back from Arthur Findlay just a couple of months ago, I remember I just recorded like 24 videos in like 3 days, right? But I put all the stuff that I understood of Neville into this one course. Is kind of like my this is my work of Neville, and I don't do this with anyone, but I could honestly say, you guys, that Neville's work, that guy behind me back there, his work has really changed my life in my journey. And I believe that it could change yours. And so it has to do with manifestation. So it talks about the stuff that we were just sharing about manifestation. And I have a promotion that's going on because I'm not going to be teaching Neville for a while on my YouTube channel. It's kind of taking a break from it. But if you were to message me on either Facebook or Instagram and you just type the word manifest, that's it. Just write the word manifest. I'll give you a coupon code, and then I'll give you 40% off of the course because I want people to still learn Neville, even though I'm not going to be teaching it on YouTube anymore. So there you go.
We expect many more great things from you, and thank you for all that you do. What would you like to leave people with as a thought that is coming to you now? I know that you have, I feel like you have angels around you, you have guides around you. You certainly have Neville as a guide. I can that presence.
Awesome. Thank you, Susanne. This is honor. Susanne, really, I want to say thank you to you and your lovely group for participating and showing up and asking questions and being part of my life at this very moment. And I just want to really say thank you to that. If I could just share my heart on this, it's simple for me, is just looking back at my life and just a lot of things that I went through, is to always follow your heart. Always, always follow your heart. I know for some of us who have grown up in religion, we've been taught that our heart is evil, our heart is sinful and wicked. And I even heard that not too long ago from someone, quoting a Bible verse. And I'm like, this is what has affected a lot of us. And I've been there. And I want to tell everyone out there that your heart is pure and continue to follow it. So if you hear something that doesn't resonate with you, whether it's religion or whatever it may be, not everything in Christianity is wrong. There's beautiful things about it. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but always follow your heart and do you, right? Because you won't regret it. Because with all the stuff that my wife and I have been through, and I'm so grateful to have her in my life alongside with me, life has been more fulfilling following my heart instead of doing what everybody expected of me, especially in the Asian community. I was kind of like the golden child, like, oh, you went to become a, intellectual and this and that and theologian and went to the Philippines. And I gave that all up, stopped my church. And then I became the crazy guy to people who people don't even want to talk to anymore. And I remember I would always ask myself back in the day, was it worth it? Was it worth it? And, losing all those people in my life, I can't say that they were never my friends because they were at that time, like all those years in my 20s. But it was definitely worth it because there's this sense of freedom when you're very true to what you're experiencing in your life, whatever it may be. And once again, just follow that, you guys. Always follow your heart. You can trust it. You can trust your heart, right? If someone says something that contradicts your heart, follow your heart. You can't go wrong with it. Your heart knows, right? Your mind is the one that rationalizes things, and reason is not a bad thing, but your heart knows. Always follow your heart.
So he's modeling discernment and being a great teacher on this earth plane. Joshua Tongol, thank you.
Thank you, Susanne. Bye, guys.
Visit our website, carefreemedium.com, or find us on social media at Carefree Medium. Thanks for supporting Carefree and Conscious.